Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at BTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to what is going on in the country, especially in light of the upcoming polls in 2024, which suddenly seem to also have another question mark regarding whether or not we will be having elections on 8th of February this year. The Senate has passed a resolution with a majority vote, which sought to delay the 8th February general polls. And this is something that, of course, is drawing a lot of varying opinions from different quarters and were discussed in the Senate today, which was later then adjourned. The discussion followed with regards to concerns that have been put forward by the senator that has raised a resolution talking about matters of security concerns, particularly in KP and Balochistan, and also weather conditions in the areas with regards to reasons for the delay of polls. These are not reasons that haven't been put up before as well, with a lot of quarters, including the ECP as well, citing the fact that there have been elections in the country previously as well in perhaps far worse conditions in the country. This is something, of course, that is also being debated in light of how close it is to the election date. Almost a month, about 4 weeks to the elections date is being discussed at the moment. And why is it now that the Senate has decided to pass this resolution? So we're going to be taking a look at what this resolution means in terms of its impact on the delay in polls. How is it going to be moving forward for the different political parties who may or may not choose to agree with it? And then, of course, with the way that the different institutions will be playing an important role, including that of the government, the judiciary, and of course the ECP as well. The information minister also said that he did not get a chance to express his opinions on the floor of the House, but he is very clear on the matter that it is the ECP's job to make sure that the electoral polls happen on time, and that this is something that he is going to be proceeding forward with in terms of the institution responsible for it. And so the caretaker setup's job is not that. But of course, this is something that time and again have been pointed towards the government for one reason or the other. And so we're going to be taking a look at what this means in terms of the caretaker setup's role, and of course what the ECP is then going to move on and decide in light of what has been happening in different political parties. We'll also be talking about at the end of the show with regards to the issue of Kashmir, and of course the very important day today that is also being observed in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and of course Azad Jammu and Kashmir as well, where the UN Security Council resolution was passed back in 1949, which claimed that it is of course the Kashmiris people and the right to self-determination that needs to be respected, supporting that plebiscite. And so we're going to be talking about all of this in light of what the reality exists so many decades later. Where we stand today is, of course, that the unilateral decisions of 2019 are in order. Then we also see that the Indian Supreme Court has also upheld this decision. And this, of course, has no meaning in light of the UN Security Council resolution that was passed earlier on this day. But of course, it does move avenues for India and its occupation forces in the occupied territory to move ahead with more draconian laws and more human rights abuses and atrocities. And so what is it that's going to happen within that area and the suffering of the people, and whether or not the Indian Supreme Court pointing towards elections in the occupied valley is going to be something that India will get away with too. We're going to be talking about that, and of course Pakistan's stance that has always been very, very clear. But what is it that the international community, including the UN, will be doing with regards to the violation of its own resolutions? That is going to be the focus of our show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios I've been joined by senior analysts Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal. We've also been joined online by Dr. Niaz, Murtaza, who's a political analyst, and Hafiz Ahsaan khokhar, who's advocate Supreme Court. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the discussion. And Dr. Niaz, I'm going to start with you because we've spoken about the timing of the general elections for quite some time in our shows as well, and we've debated about what is it with regards to the elections happening on 8th of February that still casts any doubt with regards to the timing of the elections. And now the Senate has passed this resolution with a majority vote. I want your take on whether or not you think this is just the starting point of a door that will lead us up to the delay in elections.
Well, it's always very hard to say in Pakistani politics, but as far as I can see, first of all, Senate resolutions are non-binding. They have no legal authority. Then the second thing is, the number of people who were present in the Senate when this happened, out of a Senate of about 100 members, there were only 15 people who were present on the floor of the Senate when this resolution was passed. And I think that was the only reason, that some senators who were not really aligned with any of the major parties, a lot of them were, independents who just got together. There were one or two people from, PMLN, PPP, the larger parties, and they actually opposed it. What they could have done is, they could have also pointed out that, there's no quorum to pass a resolution. Unfortunately, that did not happen. The chairperson did not notice it. It seemed a bit odd thing to do. Now, what kind of an impact can it have? A lot of people are speculating that, these senators have done this on behalf of other more powerful quarters. But even if that is true, and I don't have any evidence whether that's true or not, but just for the assumption's sake, if we assume that it's true, what kind of momentum, what kind of legal mandate would such a weak resolution give anybody? The fact of the matter is that, this is a matter for ECP, then, there are courts that are involved in the matter, then, there's the informal pressure from the larger parties. So I think the momentum is so much set in favor of elections being held that it's difficult to see how something as small as this, very weak resolution from the Senate can do anything to derail elections at the moment. It will take much bigger things to happen. Even the reasons that are being given, the security situation, it was much worse in 2008 when elections were held, even 2013. The other reason being given is winter, but let's remember that the 2008 elections were also held in February, and the turnout was so heavy. I think it was much more heavy than the 2013 and 2018 elections, or at least comparable. So I don't see any good reasons. Elections have already been postponed. It's not that even now we will have timely elections. They will still be about 3 months overdue. So I think anybody who's trying to derail it doesn't have Pakistan's interest at heart, the importance of democracy. So it's important that, all relevant quarters, all major parties, ECP, caretaker government, say in one voice that, we are going to have elections on February 8th.
Right, absolutely. And Dr. Niaz, you commented on the power of the resolution, and I want to explore that further. When we talk about the fact that, okay, it's the Senate and the resolution of the Senate and what you have outlined as well in terms of the impact or legal value it will have, that may be so. But the conversation at least has also opened up and started once again when we were so close to the elections. And the reasons, however weak they may be in terms of the precedents of the past, is still something that can be used as an excuse. Do you think that even if it's not just this resolution, it may be used as a foundation to build upon other platforms and use them to seek a delay in elections?
Well, I think, several parties, the formal parties which have a role. I'm not talking about, those who operate behind the scenes. So, who are the major parties? There's the Election Commission of Pakistan, the Supreme Court, the caretaker government, and then, the 4 or 5 major political parties. A big chunk of these major players will have to swing to the other side in favor of delaying elections before, a major momentum can be built. And then, there are, of course, the external pressures, from, the donor countries, the Western countries who have an important say in IMF matters. The fact is that, this IMF program is going to end pretty soon, and very soon Pakistan would need a much bigger IMF program to be able to, meet all its obligation in the coming year, this 2024. And I don't think, the international community would look at it very kindly. I also hear that, some promises were made at the time that, this smaller IMF loan was approved. So I think it's going to take a much bigger momentum, and the willingness of much more powerful forces than just a few independent senators in the Senate to be able to build a momentum.
Right, absolutely. Hafiz, Ahsaan, are you with us? Right. We still don't have Khokhar with us, but we'll come back to him for more opinions on the legal issues of the matter as well. But Faisal, given the current situation and the way the different political parties have reacted to this resolution, of course, there have been various ways that we can look at this situation, and timing has been a very important one previously with regards to the date of the polls. And now when we're so close, this conversation has also started once again with regards to what it is that can possibly delay the elections. And I understand what Dr. Niaz has pointed out and what has also been discussed previously as not being enough to delay the polls. But we still have certain political parties in certain quarters who have sought a delay in elections previously as well, and who may push for it with regards to this resolution or otherwise. How do you think the situation will then be taken up by especially the ECP, given the fact that we're so far ahead in the preparations of the polls?
Yeah, so now obviously if we look at the current situation, now we have a situation in which the upper house, it has actually gone through a voting, though we can say that only 14 of the members were present in there, whose eye, whether would it matter or not when it comes to the ECP getting into Supreme Court, because Supreme Court, I mean Chief Justice of the Pakistan, he made sure that all of the quarters, they are aware of the date, and that is the 8th of February. And of course all of the political parties, I'm talking about the major parties, they have abstained from voting, and at the same time, I mean they are seeking the election at the right date, which is the 8th of February. So in this context, I mean I remember we have been talking about these two reasons since a long time, and that is of course the security reasons, and then the second one, the severity of weather. I mean there are only a few places in Pakistan where of course the snowfall and these sort of things, and extreme cold would be experienced on 8th of February. But at the same time, rest of the country is all set and ready for the election. And if we talk about the turnout, only them areas would be hit by the turnout. Otherwise, the rest of the country, of course, it would be going ahead with the date, which is ensured by Chief Justice of Pakistan. So here is here is the situation, which is quite clear now, that the ECP would be putting the ball of election date once again in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court would of course assess how many members were they present in the Senate while they were obviously eyeing about it, or they would be of course assessing whether it is going to affect the whole country or not, and they will be assessing the fact that the major contesting parties, I'm talking about PTI, People's Party, PMLN, whether they have any reservations related to it or not. So if they don't have any reservations to it, of course them all parties, when they will be consulted by the Supreme Court, of course the Supreme Court would be coming up with a better solution of best date for it, and which of course to me looks like 8th of February won't be having any problems in terms of having the elections.
Isn't the ECP the body to select the best date?
Well, it is, of course, they are the ones who are supposed to prepare for the elections, and somehow till now, of course, we have been monitoring whatever ECP has been doing in our show as well. We have been monitoring that, and so far, of course, the elements which are required for making sure the security is in place, of course they have done that. When it comes to preparation overall in terms of training the ROs or DROs or the staff which is going to be conducting the elections, of course that is going through as well. So all set and ready at the part of ECP. But like I said, as we saw that previously the date came from Supreme Court, once more, of course, ECP would be referring this once more to the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court
why would it?
Yeah.
Well,
under what obligation?
Obligation.
Senate's resolution is not binding.
Senate's resolution is binding, but that is debatable.
No, it isn't binding. How is it binding?
It is not binding, but what I'm trying to say, all of these elements would be discussed when the decision is going to come. And
why?
Yes, you're right that ECP should be taking lead in it, and should be strong enough to say that 8th February is the last date. But at the same time, they have.
You're agreeing with Sana or me? Just to be clear.
I am agreeing with the system.
I'm actually on your
I'm
side,
agreeing with
so
the system
it's one
that
and the
the
same
option of course, mandating 8th February was in the hands of ECP, but somehow they have, thought of getting back to.
Okay, Farrukh, let me put it this way: do you
Supreme
see
Court.
the matter in any way going to the Supreme Court? Unfortunately, like most matters.
Yeah, I mean, who in their right mind would actually want to bring the wrath of the Supreme Court upon themselves, right? My humble submission is that there are two things that are needed to, that we need to understand. One, any resolution of either house is not binding on anybody, right? It is important to remember. Secondly, there were 14 members. There is, it wasn't even the full quorum, right? Because of that, it holds no water. But then there's another thing that is important. Remember that speech on the floor of the house, either houses, Senate or National Assembly, is protected speech. So that can also not be actually, there can't be any contempt, it can't be taken to the Supreme Court, and there can't be any, action against such statements or such a resolution. So whosoever wanted to do it, and we are going to come back to that, use a good forum, and they certainly actually managed to cause a stir. But what worries me, Sana, is not the fact that a resolution was passed by 14 disparate individuals or members of the Senate. I said disparate, not desperate, Faisal Sahab. Disparate people to actually, they passed it. It doesn't worry me. What worries me is that Pakistan has more than 50, 60 channels. Yeah. And they have been obsessing about this and magnifying it. That actually shows you that in your media's orientation, there is this fascistic tendency which never ceases to amaze me, right? Regarding, stakeholders or people who might want actually delay, and by the way, the date did not come from Supreme Court. The date did not come from Election Commission of Pakistan. This date actually came from the President of Pakistan. Yeah. The Supreme Court of Pakistan asked the Election Commission to give a date, and it actually chose a date, and then the Presidency was asked to be consulted, and that actually gave a different date, and Election Commission agreed to that date, and there wasn't that much a difference. It was only a weekend and a weekday issue, nothing else, right? Election Commission, when it itself has given this date, why would it want to actually change the date? Do you think that its opinion keeps on changing every 5 minutes? I don't think so. Now let us talk about other stakeholders. For example, there's this implication or insinuation, and I'm going to take quite a few names here. Insinuation that perhaps the armed forces would want delay in the elections. No. I have heard, and I've told you from the horse's mouth, their leader, that they have no issue with the election date or holding of election, and they are going to provide their support to the electoral process. Then the next question comes to the about the intelligence agencies, because that is also somehow a part of the whispering campaign in the country. And again, heard from the horse's mouth, the leader or that the leading organization, that there is no problem regarding that. Now, somebody would say that perhaps caretaker would want this to happen. With your respect, can you point out one speech by the Prime Minister, any of the Chief Ministers regarding possibility of delay of elections? I don't think so, because they have been very clear on this matter.
Information Minister
actually very clearly said that he was not allowed to actually speak on the but he said that it is not within our purview, and this is Election Commission's job. He said that of course circumstances are difficult, but those circumstances were there in the past as well. Now the question is, we are not asking a very simple question. Who might be behind it? Is there a possibility that those 14 people, because the body they represent is called Senate, it is going to expire in March. If the elections are delayed, their term also gets extended. Is there a possibility of self-preservation of those 14 individuals? We don't want to believe in that because we believe in conspiracy theories. If we want to believe in conspiracy theories, then of course do it. With due respect, Dr. Saab has pointed out many dynamics why the elections can't be actually postponed. Let me tell you, it can, and I'm not talking about SB's end. I'm talking about the board meeting of IMF, which is on 11th. Do you want to spoil that? With due respect, that becomes international then. Otherwise, I would have said that let them have their fun, right? A little fun if they want to make believe, and if they want to sit in the Senate and say whatever they want to, let them do it. The only thing is this speculation, this whisper campaign, this conspiracy theory can have a negative impact on Pakistan's chances of getting that a tranche approved by the board. So please have mercy on this country and let us not actually indulge in this conspiracy theory, because I think that I don't see there is a possibility of delaying elections when the CJ, Chief Justice of Pakistan, who has been tried by fire, right? When he says it is cast in stone, they can only be extra constitutional activity, and that would essentially entail some kind of martial law. Without that, nothing else is of the sort seems
right.
possible.
Dr. Niaz, I also want your opinion with regards to what is happening in the courts as well, in light of the talk about issues with regards to interpretation of different articles, particularly 62 and 63, the cases of disqualification of various political leaders, and then also the matters of a level playing field, many of course that pertain to important aspects of the upcoming general elections. Can these be in any way related to making a cause for a delay in elections by any political party or any other quarter of the country, and what value will that hold, particularly in terms of what the verdicts may be on the matter? And secondly, when we talk about the role of the caretaker setup, unfortunately, even though it has been clarified on many grounds and on many occasions by the leaders as part of the government, it still somehow comes down to them to defend themselves and their role in the matter. Why is it that this is still something that needs to be clarified, that it is in fact the ECP that gets to have a say on this matter and not the caretaker setup?
Well, yeah, I mean, the election, the Supreme Court is dealing with a lot of very, very critical cases which can, decide the fate of, how fair and free these elections are. And obviously, the extent to which elections are free and fair is directly related to, whether all the different political parties have a level playing field or not, and whether there are any restrictions on them. And so, till about a year ago, it was, the PMLN, which had been facing a lot of constraints, its leaders, convicted, kept out of the political arena. And one by one, all those cases have been withdrawn, and the verdicts changed and so on. There's only one left, which is related to the 62 1F interpretation, and that case is going on right now. And if you look at the kind of comments that the Chief Justice and other judges are making, it seems that the momentum is towards striking down the lifetime disqualification as well. So that will, be the last hurdle left in the way of the PMLN. But then, the same kind of leeway is not being afforded to PTI. So many of its leaders are, facing false cases. They've been convicted on weak grounds, and there's the fact that its election symbol right now has been withdrawn. So I think there is an equal necessity for the Supreme Court to take quick decisions, like it did on the matter of the date of elections, how quickly it decided that was a very good step. Similarly, I think they have to take some drastic steps to make sure that all the constraints that the PTI faces, with so many of its leaders behind bars on flimsy excuses without conviction, they should have the right to be able to run their campaigns, be out. None of them are facing the kind of trials where they have to be kept in jail indefinitely. You may not allow them to go out of the country, fine, but there's no reason to keep them on jail on, the different cases on which they are being tried, whether it's May 9th, whether it's Cypher case or, Tosha Khana, this, that. So I think there is a need for, the Supreme Court to take decisive action, because otherwise it would seem that, it's giving relief to one party, but not the other party. So I think that's the crucial fact. With regard to, the role of the caretaker government, it's true that, in the past when it was, the matter of, the holding of the elections in KP and Punjab, the funds were not released on time and all that. But I think that was before the caretaker government came in. Right now, I haven't seen any steps being taken by the caretaker government, which could, lead to a delay in election. Of course, they have the authority. If they do not release the funds, or if they do not release, the human resources that are needed to, hold the elections, they can throw a spanner. But I don't see them doing that, and that's why I'm saying that, it will take several of the key stakeholders to, swing to the other side to delay elections at that time. And right now, I don't see that kind of, motivation, either whether it's from the caretaker government, the ECP, the Supreme Court, some of the major parties. So that's why I don't assign too much value to this meaningless resolution that's been passed.
All right. Faisal, an important aspect with regards to the concerns that have been raised, especially in terms of security and the spike in terrorist activities that we have seen in provinces, especially of KP and Balochistan, is also an important discussion in general. And I want to understand then how the ECP decides that the matter is, of course, safe for the elections to be held, and that information that comes in from certain quarters is quite important and relevant. So this matter, when these concerns are being raised by different politicians or senators, that there are security concerns, is it not a matter of the authorities responsible for that to give a green light or a red light on the matter? And if that light is there, that it means that we have done everything in our capacity to prepare for the elections. Is that correct?
Yes, Anna, obviously, if we look at our country, we are a democratic country, and I think democracy requires elections. And if we talk about our past as well, in past, of course, there were worse situations in past as well, especially while we were, fighting a war on terror. 20 years, during them 20 years, so many things has happened. Only once, of course, we saw that the extended time period was given in the case of, Murtaza Benazir Bhutto, when she was, assassinated, and after that, of course, what we saw that there was an extended period for the elections. But at the same time, we know that the election did take place, and during that time, of course, we know that the magnitude of the terrorism, it was far higher at that time. And of course, if we look at 2013's elections, at that time we were still seeing terrorism taking place in Pakistan, and the areas we are highlighting in terms of attraction in terms of terrorism, of course it is KPK's few of the areas where there are lots of incidents that take place. They have been taking place in past as well, but eventually the reason that democratic government needs to be on Constitution Avenue is that they will be fighting against the very terrorism, and it is necessary for them to go through this process of election and come to Constitution Avenue so that they can fight that terrorism. When it comes to JUIF, of course they have these kind of reservations that they are not being allowed, and they are not being they are facing problems, hurdles when it comes to going out for campaign and all. It is understandable, but it is not the only JUIF which is facing in them certain parts of the country. it is all of the parties which are concerning and concerned about it. And at the same time, if different parties can go through a different mode of campaign, then they can apply that as well. But at the same time, we know that it is important to have the elections. And by the way, Sana, when it comes to the security agencies have been doing their best, and we know that if few of the incidents they do take place, that is after so many incidents, hundreds of incidents, they are stopped to be taking place. If one or two, if there is something that couldn't be done properly, and yes, that did take place, then of course it shows that constantly the war is going on, but at the same time few of the incidents they do take place. But all we can say is that the security forces of Pakistan, of course Pakistan Army, it extends the full help when it comes to Election Commission of Pakistan seeking help in terms of the security matters. They are provided with. There is no hindrance in that context that the security forces would be coming up with anything else other than saying that we are extending our help to the ECP.
No, I understand that, but my question, Faisal, is whose onus is this in terms of making sure that the security situation is clear for elections? If God forbid there is an untoward incident, who are we going to blame?
Well, the nature, the fate. We can say that.
Not the nature.
Yeah, the fate. The fate we can say that.
It is not natural death.
Yeah, the fate we can only say we can only blame for that, because we are in a war. We shouldn't be forgetting this, that we are still in a war against the terrorism. And but at the same time, if we talk about the nations do experience ups and downs in their in their times, and of course we are going through few of the downs, and during them downs we all as Pakistanis we have to fight them back. And I think we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with the security forces to fight them back. And that's what it is all about.
I absolutely understand that. But Farrukh, given the situation at the moment and the kind of pre-election talk of unfair elections that we're already seeing in so many factors, I want to understand then that given the fact that this is just being raised now and perhaps will be talked about in line of the upcoming elections as well, then how is it that when we actually move on to the election day, and if there are concerns that are being raised, or even if it's not a substantial by a lot of political parties, how will we be able to say with credibility that the elections were in fact free, fair, safe and transparent?
Right, Sana, I think that as was pointed out by all, these difficulties have been there in the past, and nobody says that any election that is held is going to be perfect. But that doesn't mean that elections should stop or can be stopped, right? Frankly, when I tell you about my firm belief that the elections are going to be held on a given date, it may help actually to remind you that from day one I've been saying that I have no dog in this fight. I have no opinion of my own regarding these issues, because as I have repeatedly pointed out that I am never going to vote again. But having said that, because we are looking at grassroots realities, ground realities, here's a very clear question for you. In the past, when in 2008, what happened was not merely a leader being killed. I tell you what exactly happened. Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto's party was at that time being tipped as the next ruler of the country. And if she had won, if she had lived, she would have been the prime minister of the country. So what terrorists did was they took out the one among equals, the most eligible candidate of the country. And yet, how many days delay was there? 10 days. And that too because the entire country erupted, right? I don't think that when something bad happens, of course, who do you blame? You blame the terrorists, because they are the people who actually kill, right? And why do they kill? Why do they attack? You have to be very clear about that. Otherwise, of course, we keep on adding to this conspiracy theory milieu, this environment, this zeitgeist that we cannot actually, remove ourselves from. So when I say that the elections are going to take place, it is not my desire. It is not something that I'm pushing for. It is something that my objective analysis gives me indication is going to happen. I've already told you about the Chief Justice of Pakistan, and then the Constitution of Pakistan, right? Now everything has aligned and everybody seems to be very clear that the elections are going to take place on a certain date. So why would I allow of course, in every political culture, Sana, there are three kind of forces, right? There are pranksters, there are people who have their vested interests so entrenched that they cannot think beyond their own interest, and then enemies of the state or the country. Now the pranksters, we have seen recently that PTI guy who went to a court and sought a judgment, a freeze on ROs and their nomination. His entire party did not know what is happening, and this happened. So you have pranksters. It can be a prank today as well. But I don't think for a second that there has been any time during this electoral cycle when somebody hasn't actually tried to put brakes. It can be a prank. It can be genuine self-interest.
Right.
But when it comes to people who attack innocent citizens and try to kill them, may they be leaders or may they be anybody else, if they are killing them, they are called terrorists, and terrorists are the people who should be blamed. State does what it can to protect its citizens.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Niaz, before you go, I also want to take your perspective with regards to what we're observing today in terms of what has happened in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and especially the UN Security Council resolutions that we keep on referring back to on this day, 1949. I want to understand, given the unilateral decisions of 2019 and then the Indian Supreme Court's verdict also on the matter, we, of course, have reiterated our stance on various platforms and have also said that this does not change the special status of Jammu and the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. I want to understand, does it change the matter on ground? Does it change the way that India will now be moving ahead, perhaps with regards to elections in the occupied valley? And does it change in any way the seriousness of the violation of the UNSC? Because it seems that violation alone itself is not enough, but will the UN now be looking at it differently, or perhaps have any such consequences with regards to the Indian Supreme Court's decision?
Well, the Indian Supreme Court's decision is not surprising at all because, it looked at the situation from a very narrow perspective of, what the Indian Constitution says. The fact of the matter is that, the Indian Constitution does not apply fully to the Kashmir region because, it's a disputed territory, and, the right framework to look at the situation is, the UN resolutions and the negotiations that had taken place between India and Pakistan earlier on. So, it doesn't really change anything at the ground level, whatever India does. The fact of the matter is that, it cannot, get political legitimacy for its illegal occupation of Kashmir, either at the local level, in the hearts and minds of the Kashmiri people. They don't accept Indian hegemony, Indian control over it, and then at the same time, it doesn't give it any legitimacy at the international level. Because, if you look around, out of the 200 countries in the world, I don't think there is even one country which agrees with the Indian position that, Kashmir is its domestic matter, and Kashmir is part of India. So this is, the big challenge that India faces, the fact of the matter that, it doesn't have political legitimacy at the local level within Kashmir, and then at the international level. So those are the two, strands of illegitimacy that Pakistan must, somehow utilize, because otherwise, in terms of, militarily there isn't any option there. Political pressure, it cannot apply there. But these two strands of illegitimacy that India faces, that is the only thing that may force India to come back to the negotiating table one day, because as it becomes a bigger and bigger international power, it would not like to have this stigma that it's holding on to an area which is not recognized by the international community. So how much Pakistan can diplomatically use that leverage in the future is the challenge before Pakistan. But otherwise, right now, the chances of, some sort of, momentum developing, of course, both countries are going to have fresh elections within this year. Whether some momentum can develop once, the new governments are in place, that remains to be seen. But I don't expect too many, huge changes in the near future.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz Murtaza, for joining us and taking a part in the discussion. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for being part of the debate as always. That's all that we have from the show, and we're now going to be moving on with, of course, what happens in the country with regards to the political situation in our next shows, and also, of course, talking about important national matters such as that of Kashmir. There is, of course, a lot of emphasis that Pakistan has put on the matter as always, and it has been reiterated by the Prime Minister again today in his meeting with Ambassador Munir Akram. But, of course, Pakistan will be doing its part. We hope that the international community does too. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll now see you Monday.